Well, a very tough 3 weeks of racing. 13 mountain stages for the guys as they started out earlier today with a team time trial. Second day tomorrow, the first summit finish. They moved counterclockwise down to the southern part of the state. And in the first weekend, the first summit finish up at Peñacabarga. Moving then on a long transfer up to the northeast part of the country. They will hit more mountains than they certainly care to deal with as they finally, in the final weekend, get up to the Anglerou, which is one of the most brutal climbs in all of cycling. It is a climber's paradise this year at the Vuelta, and we will have a climber who will triumph after 3 weeks.
Stage number 1 of the 2013 Vuelta a Espana, the team time trial in the town of Vilanova de Arosa, finishing in San Sencio, 27.4 kilometers. Peter Young along with Todd Gogolski. Thank you for tuning in to our live coverage of the final Grand Tour of the season. This is BMC Racing, and they are over the water getting ready for the start. Now, this is the 4th team off on today's stage number 1. This is the 4th year in a row that the Vuelta is starting off with a team time trial. A little bit longer than last year's start, Todd, and also an interesting start on one of these barges and platoons. Yeah, big time. It's a very unusual start for these guys in a very tricky discipline, but tomorrow and further on, tons of climbing. The 2013 Vuelta a Espana, the final Grand Tour of the year, is underway. And back to the start line here at today's team time trial. No climbing to speak of today, as on course again for the 4th year in a row with the team time trial. Now, again, let's talk about that interesting start. This is the first time that we have had a Grand Tour start over the water. They're like a pontoon or a raft, and beneath there are cages that they grow seafood in. So kind of a nod to the local industry here on the coast. They will get some winds today. Speaking of the coast, Todd, some winds off the Atlantic Ocean could play some havoc here for the teams here in the team time trial. It's a beautiful discipline as we get this shot of the Caja Rural team out of Spain, but it's also a very tricky discipline. And part of the reason it's so tricky is because they have to ride incredibly close together to maximize their energy savings through drafting. And they're on these special time trial bikes, which don't handle as well as a typical road bike. And they're going so incredibly fast that they're on their limit physically. And then you know how it is when you get really tired, you start to make mistakes physically, and it can be hard to judge your speed and other things. GC contender for Caja Rural is David Arroyo, the 33-year-old Spaniard. Fairly quiet year for him, and this is the boat that will take the teams to the start line. So an interesting way to start the Vuelta a Espana. We will take a pause, and after this break, come back with our continuing coverage of stage number 1. Stage 1 continues of the Vuelta a Espana, the team time trial. This is the 6th team to start, Cofidis. The first team that we did not see was Team NetApp, and then Orica Green Edge, followed by Argos, BMC, Caja Rural, and now Cofidis. Cofidis, a team that is not expected to have a particularly strong ride in the team time trial. It's not a discipline that they've traditionally shown in. And one of the things I like here about the start is the way they've set out the riders off the water. It almost looks like they're riding on the water there. It's got a nice reflection there under the, what I believe is plexiglass there that they start out on. This being stage 1, Gogo, let's talk about what is at stake here today at the Vuelta. Well, there's a lot at stake. First of all, they're setting the tone, so it's going to give the riders an idea how they are, not only amongst their teammates, but amongst all the other teams. And at the intermediate checkpoint there, Orica Green Edge with the best time, just under 11 minutes. NetApp in the 2nd spot, and the Argos Shimano guys in 3rd. But back to the other testing things. Basically, they need to find out where they are, and this team time trial is very difficult for them to start the race with. So they're going to get a lot of
sort of parameters figured out, how good they are amongst their team, how good they are amongst other guys, the red jerseys at stake of the overall leader, and the stage win. It's a big day.
Caja Rural on course. The teams are starting in 4-minute intervals, this being a bit of a longer team time trial. I still don't think, Todd, that we are going to see any team catch one another. We will have gaps, but boy, it'd be hard-pressed to have a 4-minute gap.
A 4-minute gap is big, and you can see the climb here that the Caja Rural team is on right out of the gate. This tops out about 6K into the race or so. David Arroyo would be their GC man, and the profile is pretty tricky, as we'll take a look at it here, because what you see is when they come out of the start house down at sea level, they've got to get over the first climb, then it's a very tricky descent, then there are a couple of other climbs that are not as sharp, but still with the wind, it's very high speed and technical, and some of the corners set up into the bottom of a climb, and so you can lose a guy off the bottom out of the bottom of the climb that way.
Team NetApp, 20K in. They were the first team to start today. They're a German pro-continental team seeking their first Grand Tour stage win, and it is their debut at the Vuelta this year. They received a wildcard invitation to the race.
One of the things I like about that NetApp team, Peter, is that they ride aggressively. They not only go for stages, but they go for GC as well. So they're a dynamic squad, and they're a lot of fun to watch, and it's great to have them in this year's Vuelta. And now we're back here to the Spanish Caja Rural team. You know, it's always good to be a home country team. You get a little bit more TV time.
Taking a look at the recent team time trial performances that might give us an indication of how things will shake out today. At the Tour, you had Orica, Green Edge, and then it was Omega Pharma 1 second behind, followed by Team Sky. At last year's World Championships, it was Omega Pharma, and then BMC came in second, and Orica was third on the podium.
Yeah, and the Orica guys, they're not feeling quite so frisky today. I spoke with their director, Neil Stevens, just about an hour and a half ago, and they've got a little bit of a younger team and a little bit of a team with less speed in it here. So he's thinking more like 5th to 10th for him and his team today.
7th team to start, Vacan Soleil. Liwa Westra, number 219 for Vacan Soleil, one of their top riders.
And this is one of those teams that is losing its title sponsor at the end of the season. And this Dutch team has been a very aggressive team over the last handful of years, as it's a fairly young team, but they will animate the race here over the next 3 weeks.
Westra, the 30-year-old Dutch rider, he's the reigning and 2-time Dutch national time trialing champion. Many of the riders, we might as well bring it up now, go use the Vuelta for their preparation for the World Championships coming up in September. And also guys like the Vacan Soleil riders, they're riding for a contract for next year.
Indeed they are. There's no doubt, Peter, that there is a lot riding on these guys' shoulders. It's not just here in this race, but it's a lot of guys. It's for their future. And most of the guys who are doing the Worlds will usually come through the Vuelta, but we don't always see that. And look at this, BMC at the same time as Orica Green Edge. And now we still see the NetApp guys 2 seconds back, but they're now dropped down to 3rd.
Yeah, BMC led by the reigning world champion Philippe Gilbert, yet to win a race this year wearing the rainbow jersey.
Well, and let's put that into a little bit of context. Philippe was a prolific winner a couple of seasons ago, but last year he struggled a bit. He didn't get his first win until a stage of the Vuelta, and then he went on and won the World. So, yeah, he's got a lot of expectations on his shoulders, but I'll tell you what, if I won a stage of the Vuelta or two and won the Worlds again, that'd be a pretty good year.
The last 12 world champions all competed at the Vuelta, so it comes up in discussions. Is the Vuelta a good springboard for the World Championships? I think that stat proves that yes, it is. Now, in today's team time trial, it is the 5th rider across the line that gives each team its official time.
Right, so if there are 4 guys that drop the 5th guy, those 4 guys don't get their time until the 5th guy goes across. Now, if you're dropped and you're off the back of the group, well, then you actually get your actual time. But for the team, it's the time of the 5th rider, so they have to use their guys carefully. You don't want to shed a bunch of guys on that first climb, and then you have so many fewer guys later on to work and get the rest with.
Yeah, we saw Lampre in their pink jerseys on the boat ride. That was Michele Scarponi, the 33-year-old Italian. He is their leading GC contender. Here is Orica Green Edge. So a little bit off the pace, set by Team NetApp.
Orica looked like it was down a rider there. I don't know that I noticed a full 9, and I have not yet heard if in fact they did lose somebody.
Baden Cook, I think, was dropped early on in the opening kilometers. So the veteran Baden Cook, I believe he's making his Vuelta debut here.
Well, Baden,
not off to a good start.
Baden never likes climbing, and that's a fairly sharp little rise at the start of the bike race as the Lampre guys heading out onto the water. And actually, Baden Cook just coming back to Spain from racing the Tour of Utah, where his teammate Michael Matthews was a prolific winner.
Boy, you got to hope none of these guys get seasick sitting out there on that barge. Now, you've got the nerves of starting a Grand Tour, the final one of the year, and now you got to sit on this boat. It certainly spices up the start to this year's race.
Indeed it does for the guys. You know, these big races, Peter, they're always looking for ways to showcase and highlight local culture, local business, local scenery, whatever it is. And so, as you mentioned, they're using something here that is part of the local, well, business industry.
Next up, Omega Pharma Quick Step, one of the better team time trialing groups in the peloton. They are the reigning world champions and nearly won the team time trial at the Tour. They were 1 second back.
This team should have a very solid ride as they put a fair amount of focus and attention into the team time trial discipline. Tony Martin in here, and he will be a guy taking some massive turns on the front as he tests himself prior to the World Championships, where he would like to win that event yet again. But boy, the Worlds are going to be loaded with competition in the time trial this year, with Cancellara really targeting it, Bradley Wiggins, as well as Taylor Phinney. We may have a time trial at the World Championships for the ages this year.
Yeah, Tony Martin, the 28-year-old German, he has won the last 2 time trial World Championships, has been nearly unbeatable in individual time trials this year. He did lose the second one at the Tour this year. Had a bit of a climb in it. It's not really a climber.
Yeah, he's not a real fan of time trialing uphill, but sometimes he goes amazingly well uphill. So I think he maybe also had a little bit of an off day, finishing 27th in that final time trial at the Tour de France earlier this year.
Lampre getting ready for their tour. At the start, stage 1 continues. We saw the time there, just over 30 minutes for Team NetApp, again making their debut at the Vuelta. Here is Omega Pharma on course. Their running time on the lower right-hand portion of your screen. They are the reigning world champions, and again, I think they have probably the best time trialist in the world in Tony Martin. He has been simply unbeatable this year.
Yeah, and look at who's on the front. Tony Martin, number 161, the big guy who has a very slippery position. He's really flexible. He can provide good power, and he handles his bike well when he's in a really radical time trial position.
Zdeněk Štýbar, the 27-year-old Czech, also riding for Omega Pharma, won the recent Eneco Tour that you and I got to call last weekend. Exciting finish to that race.
He was impressive in that race, I have to say. So this here, for people wondering what's going on, the UCI measures every single bike. They have a jig, which actually we'll show people a little bit later on in our coverage during stage 11, the individual time trial, where they just make sure that their handlebars, the relationship between their handlebars, their saddle, and is within regulation.
Looking at BMC, one of their riders slipping back, perhaps having done his work for the day. So Team NetApp still at that juncture had the time to beat. And the finish for Orica Green Edge, you can tell that there is a bit of a downhill at the tourist town of San Sencio. also on the Atlantic coast. And they are about 10 seconds behind. Bit of a disappointment for Orica Green Edge unless Team NetApp has put in a phenomenal time today.
Well, Orica, as I said, Neil Stevens telling me earlier that he was just hoping for a respectable ride in the top 10. He didn't think this team was really capable of a podium spot unless things really went well. But one thing I did notice at the finish line there was how stiffly the flag was blowing out of the riders' left. And you can see it here as well. There's a fair bit of wind on this course, predominantly tailwind, but as they twist and turn, it becomes a crosswind. And with the very technical nature of these riders riding super close together in the team time trial, if you come into a corner and a gust all of a sudden comes from a different side, it can blow one rider into another on these time trial bikes and cause crashes, and we see that often. It's a really dicey discipline on the road.
168. Guillaume van Kiersbulk actually had a nice run up a couple days there last weekend at the Eneco Tour. Gianni Meersman for Omega, another one of their top sprinters. Won a couple stages, the first two at the Volta a Catalunya earlier in the spring. Now AG2R on course, and their young Colombian, Carlos Bentancur, the 23-year-old. He is the young man to watch for this team. He has had an amazing year, Todd. 5th at the Giro and won the youth classification.
Yeah, just impressive what the Colombians are doing right now. And Bentancur, one of the things I really like about him is he's a visible guy. He's not a guy that just follows wheels and you say, wow, he got 5th place overall. He's a guy that you see attacking and going for stage wins and really animating and lighting up the courses. He's also got an Italian on this team. It's quite interesting that it's a French team with a Colombian who's one of their stars and an Italian, Domenico Pozzovivo, another one of their stars. And the team is saying that Bentancur is here maybe more for stages than for the GC, and Pozzovivo is in Spain for the GC. But, you know, that always can change out on the road. And
that may be Baden Cook coming in, no?
Yeah,
Green Edge.
I believe that is, as he got dropped a little bit earlier. Now he still has to get to the finish line before the time cut would eliminate him from the race, and actually doesn't look like Baden Cook to me, but regardless, it is one of the Orica men, so they lost several guys before the finish. And it could be pretty hard to pick out their face with the TT helmet on and all of the gear, especially the time trial helmet. It really covers up the face.
Team Sky waiting for their moment to get onto the bars to take him out to the starting pontoon.
That is the Belarusian Vasil Kirienka there, the man who is the big diesel on that team, and he does so much work for them.
Team Lotto Belisol.
So if you notice their handlebars, the extensions, that's one of the things that jig was measuring earlier. They can't be, your hands can't be up super high. They have to more or less, your forearms more or less have to be parallel to the ground. So that's one of the regulations. The other regulation is how far behind the bottom bracket the front of the saddle has to be, because the further you move it forward, the more aero you are. But they won't let you go like they do in a triathlon. They won't let you go too far forward. And also the overall reach is regulated. So there are a bunch of things that the officials look at on these time trial bikes.
Back out on course, this is Omega Pharma. The first part of this course, you can see one of the teammates also trying to signal with the arm, but you're not going to have the wind here, Todd, on this first portion of the team time trial, because you have these windy, twisty turns throughout the town. You don't have those winds off the Atlantic yet. Yeah,
and one of the things I just want to mention, you saw all these riders gesticulating here as they're coming into these chicanes with the cobbles and everything. The technical nature of this course, I cannot really give enough credit to. When you watch how good they are here as the Movistar team is coming into the split. Oh no, this is Caja Rural, excuse me. And it looked like they were 4th best at that point. But the technical nature of this discipline on a course like this with a predominantly tailwind course really fast, it's going to make it really tough.
Well, that will clearly give you an indication of just how windy it is here on the Atlantic, and just what a beautiful bucolic scene here for the start of the Vuelta. Have you ever been in a race with a start like that, as this is
No.
Team Argos?
No, and look, they only have 5 guys, so they used up all their guys coming into the finale, and they're sitting in the 3rd spot as they come to the line.
And Team Argos with the youngest team here at the Vuelta. It's Team NetApp still with the time to beat of 30.34, and Team Argos crosses the line over a minute back. And so you're starting on a pontoon, and then you've got the team time trial where it's not some flat sprinter stage, Todd, where some GC guys can, lose some time on stage 1 as Team Saxo Tinkoff is underway, and they will be losing the Tinkoff to their team at the end of this year.
Well, one of the things I just noticed was the speed of the Orica guys that just came across the line. 51.6 kilometers an hour with climbing. That's 32 miles an hour. So it gives you an idea how fast they're going when they're not going uphill. And they were a minute down on the NetApp team.
We did not get to see the Team Argos Shimano start. We brought in our live coverage at the start for the BMC team. They were the 4th team to start, so Team NetApp, Orca, and Argos started before we came on live. And so for Team Argos, their average age under 25 years old, right around 25. Radio Shack, the oldest team. And so perhaps a bit of youth on display, Todd, with a team that's got some nice young legs, but boy, they put themselves in a bit of a hole here.
Yeah, well, it's the way it goes, as their director Neil Stevens was saying. 5th to 10th was their goal. Still amazing, 32 miles an hour for those guys, and being a minute behind the NetApp team. And NetApp not even favored to win this thing. There should be some teams that are much quicker, and one of those right here is the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team. This squad should set a very good pace.
Final 4 riders for Argos coming to the finish line.
And notice the man on the front there just signaling to his teammates that the corner is in front of them, as they just want to make sure at this point they get across the finish line in one piece.
Yeah, their average age just over 25 years. They've got no Marcel Kidder or John Degenkolb for Team Argos here at the Vuelta. Team Sky getting onto the boat. Not going fishing today. What goes through your mind when you were racing and you were starting a 3-week or a 1-week stage race?
Well, if you're a Team Sky team, you are here for the general classification. If you're a BMC team, you're definitely here with Pinotti, the multiple-time Italian national champion, leading through. And they want to try and win this stage, but they end up in 2nd by 1 second to NetApp.
Just off of the pace, BMC 30.35. So Team NetApp, through the first 4 teams, has the time to beat. They're a pro-continental team, perhaps coming into this debut Vuelta with a bit of a chip on their shoulder.
Well, certainly the BMC team wanted to try and win this team time trial. They knew it was going to be hard, but I don't think they ever thought coming in that the NetApp Endura team would be 1 second ahead of them at the finish line.
Well, no Taylor Finney for the BMC team. He took a nasty spill at stage 6 last Saturday at the Eneco Tour. This is Cofidis at the 20K split, so it was Team NetApp and then BMC. Cofidis is about 46 seconds off the pace.
You can see guys getting trailed off the back of that team, and back here it is the big men on this Belgian team, Omega Pharma Quick-Step. These guys have a lot of horsepower, and I really expect they will have a pretty good ride. You were asking me what guys are thinking about, though, as they get ready to start. And then we got into the finish of the BMC team. So everybody has different objectives. BMC is not really here to put a guy on the podium overall. They're here to target specific stages, and one of those would be the team time trial today. Also, Philippe Gilbert wants to win stages. And so here's where we are right now.
at the 9.2K split. So Omega Pharma, no surprise, has the top time at that split. La Nouvelle Sol just underway. And this is not the strongest Lotto team that they probably could have sent to a Grand Tour.
Well, let's remember that these guys are required to do each of the World Tour events. And eventually, your team just gets worn out. And so you end up having to send guys that you maybe have a different objective, which is to do some developing. And that, to me, looked like it was Serge Powell's, who was just coming off the back of the Omega Pharma train.
Kevin DeWard at the back there, number 162. There is Tony Martin, 161.
These guys are falling apart a little bit right now. This is not good. You see Tony Martin had to get right back in there on Johnny Mearsman, but they're trying to close down the gap. And look at this, more than one guy in the wind. You never want that in a team time trial. You got to be right on that wheel. These guys are starting to crater.
So Tony Martin and Johnny Mearsman trying to keep it together for Omega Pharma. Team Sky yet to start. Cannondale getting onto the barge as they are now about to get off the barge and get onto the pontoon for their start for the stage 1 of the Vuelta. Team Sky, they were second at the team time trial at the Tour de France this year, 3 seconds off the pace of Orica, but no Chris Froome, no Bradley Wiggins, but they do have Rigoberto Urán.
This is a very different Team Sky squad than we're used to seeing, without either a Wiggins or a Froome or a Porte. And Cofidis, solid ride for them as they're inside the top 5 right now, but I think that place is going to fall before the end of the day.
Team NetApp still has the fastest time at the finish, 30.34, and Cofidis 31.54, so 1.2 back. Cannondale now on course, and the man to watch, Ivan Basso, who has won the Giro d'Italia twice.
Oh, Basso and his team putting a lot of stock in his legs and his preparation for this race. For me, I would be surprised to see Basso truly fighting it out for the top step of the podium, but you just never know with a wily old veteran. I mean, he can put it together at times. Now let's have a look at his team. Notice how 3 guys are a little bit off the back, so they're more in the wind. They're having to close down this gap. That means they're having to work harder than they need to.
Team Saxo Tinkoff.
Evgeny Petrov, the Russian, just getting spit out the back. So now he will just get into sort of the diesel mode and make sure that he makes the time cut. Let's see how many guys they have left. It looks like they may have the other 8 up here.
And now this is actually, this is Team Saxo Tinkoff. So that may have been one of the Consolet riders that was dropped, because now you've got Saxo with Roman Kreuziger. We saw him right before the last break. He has had just a fantastic year. The 27-year-old Czech was 5th at the Tour de France, won the Amstel Gold.
Indeed, but right now everybody's trying to dethrone these guys. This is what's known as the hot seat. In the individual time trial, it's just 1 chair. But when you have a team time trial, you got to have 9 there, as those guys are the ones everybody is taking the shot at right now.
I guess this is the extent of the climbing today, just a bit of an uphill. But you could see the guys in the back out of the saddle. And it's still the time of Omega Pharma at that early intermediate at 9.2K that they have the fastest time by 14 seconds over BMC and Orica Green Edge. And now the finish for Omega Pharma. So let's see, can they beat the time of Team NetApp? This could be the fastest time of the day. You've got the 5 riders, so they did not have any problems on the final finishing section. And yes, they take the lead by 19 seconds here, stage 1.
And Tony Martin there leading them through, the 2-time world champion, with the jaw wide open as he just flogs himself. Remember, they only had 5 guys guys for the last 7 kilometers. So that was a brutal day. That's Bjarne Riis, the director and team owner for Saxo Tinkoff. So he's talking into the guys' radios. They can hear what he says. He's giving them instructions about the course, about their pace. He's trying to encourage the different riders and just words of encouragement. And he has to know how to get the most out of his riders.
AG2R coming into the 20K split. Omega Pharma with the fastest time, and AG2R's got a bit of work to do over the last 7K. They're almost a minute down.
Not a good day for that French team, but they're not known as a team time trial squad. So they may be a little disappointed, but it's not that really surprising.
Well, music.
Tough to tell. Kreuziger now just getting on the back there. As Irizar on the left, just walking by Fabian Cancellara. Cancellara, a perfectionist on his bike. Spoke with his team, now I guess about 2.5 hours ago, and asked how good Fabian was going to be in this time trial. And they told me that he's not at his best yet. He's still coming up for the World Time Trial Championship, but he should be pretty solid in this time trial.
Bjarne Riis and Saxo Tinkoff not too bad at the 20K split, only 9 seconds down. And so Kreuziger, Nicholas Roche, Rafael Machka, Nicky Sorensen all doing a nice job. Now this is Euskaltel, and this is their swan song. So easy to catch their orange jerseys in the peloton, but this is their final year of existence as Lampre approaches the finish line, and they will be nowhere near the fast time laid down by Omega Pharma, just trying to get in under 31 minutes, and they just do at 30.55, so they are 40 seconds off the pace.
Yeah, but you know what this finish tells me? Michele Scarponi is on the front, right there on the right side of your screen, leading him into the finish. It tells me he really is hungry. He wants a result here. He's pushing his team at the end of this time trial, saying, we need every fraction of a second we can get, because I need that for the general classification battle.
Well, first edition, there were only 50 cyclists back in 1935. The first time trial just before Todd got into the peloton, 1941. Then Roberto Heras with the most career Vuelta wins with 4, 05, 04, 03, and 2000. AG2R across the line in the 8th spot, a minute 25 down. So that's a bit of a gap now that will have to be made up by Carlos Bentancur, the youngster, the Colombian.
Yeah, the Colombian, as well as his teammate Pozzovivo. So it goes. You live by the sword, you die by the sword when it comes to the team time trial. If you've got a good TTT team, it's awesome. It's like free time. And if you don't, you're totally in trouble.
Belkin off of the Batia, or the pontoon as we've been calling it, at the start here of their team time trial with their green jerseys. They are on course. The Dutch teams got Bauke Mollema, Lorenz ten Dam. Both of those riders, Todd, made some noise at this year's Tour de France. Mollema finished off 6th, ten Dam, lost some time. At the end of it, he was 13th.
Yeah, both really solid riders, but one thing we will notice here, they only have 8 guys. So Theo Bos was taken out of the start by the team this morning due to some testing, and it was ostensibly sort of tabled as a health issue. And so they start 1 guy short, which is not good. This is Rigoberto Urán in the middle of your screen with the long locks coming out of the back of his helmet.
Number 198 for Team Sky. Boassenhagen again making his return after that crash at the Tour de France. Astana will be the final team to start today. The Kazakhstan team started in 2007, and they have the reigning Giro d'Italia champion Vincenzo Nibali, the 28-year-old. Also won the Vuelta back in 2010. He actually won the Vuelta without ever winning a stage that year.
It was a good battle, though, I have to say, as day after day in the mountains he was challenged.
Boassenhagen, number 192 there, struggling to stay on the wheel of Dario Cataldo.
Yeah, a little bit. Wow, this is, whoa, and Boassenhagen looks like he's about to come off. Really uncharacteristic for their Norwegian strongman, and that's it. I have a feeling they're going to lose him here right at the beginning of the race.
Well, he took a lot of time off of the bike after that crash at stage 12 of the Tour, and perhaps just simply does not have it here. He's just not ready for this type of intensity. But this is a surprise.
Yeah, it's just not right for Boassenhagen, and that's it. I mean, he just went as deep as he could go to stay on, and he came off. That's a big loss for the team.
Saxo Tinkoff. About 30.5, so 30.31. They are 16 seconds back of Omega Pharma, so they lost a bit of time. They were about 9 seconds back at the 20-kilometer checkpoint.
But still a really good ride for them, because they've got some men who are definitely good in the general classification, and that's a good place to be.
Yeah, Nicky Sorensen, their veteran, the 38-year-old. He won a stage at the Vuelta back in 2005, although we keep talking about a veteran or an old man in the peloton. Wait till we get to Chris Horner. Oh, yeah.
Well, and for Saxo Tinkoff, the man they'll be riding for in the general would, of course, be Roman Kreuziger, so it's a good spot for him. There's not really anybody in the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team that has that general classification potential. So these are the guys that are leading the stage at this point.
Well, Zdeněk Štýbar surprised us at the Eneco Tour, but there's quite a bit of difference between a one-week stage race and a three-week Grand Tour. You can see the flags fairly stiff in the wind here at the start. And this is Radio Shack set for their start.
Fabian Cancellara will lead him off the line, closest to our camera.
Well, Chris Horner, the American, 41 years old. He is the oldest here at the Vuelta by more than 2 years over the Italian Matteo Tossato. Horner finished second at the Tour of Utah earlier this month. He's been hampered this year a bit by a knee injury, but as always, not suffering for confidence, and he would love to be in the red jersey at the end of tomorrow's stage 2. Can he do it, Todd?
Oh boy, you know, I don't know, quite honestly. The thing I love about Chris is that he's the eternal optimist, and the thing that's really difficult to know about Chris is he's eternal optimist, and so you don't know what he's going to do tomorrow, but he's definitely going for it. This is the team of Cannondale. Ivan Basso in here, a man who's a winner of this, not this Grand Tour, but the Giro d'Italia before, and he would like to try and do something here.
Movistar coming up here with their turn on course. This is the 2013 Vuelta a España presented. 2011 Vuelta winner Juan Jose Cobo is not going to ride this year, just simply not on form, and so that to me tells you just how strong this Movistar team is. They've got a former champ and not picked a ride.
Yeah, that's got to be tough on him, but Cobo is a guy who struggles and has struggled over the years with motivation and depression, and that really impacts his fitness level at different times.
Valverde won the Vuelta back in 2009, was second last year. He's a guy that has been close but no cigar so many times at the World Championships, second twice. He was third last year. What does he need to focus on here at the Vuelta to get another Grand Tour win? So many of the climbers keep talking about the climb, that penultimate stage. Many think it won't be decided until then, stage 20.
Well, the Angliru is wicked. It is an absolutely brutal mountain. But one of the things that the critics of Valverde have spoken about over the years is that he tends to lose time. He gets eliminated in a split in a crosswind or something on days that are not really mountainous. And so he keeps his focus and he keeps his positioning good on the really mountainous days, but on the other days he lets his guard down a little bit at times. What we've seen over the last handful of years is he's getting better at that. But it's 3 weeks of racing. I mean, if you think they average probably 5.5 hours a day for 3 weeks, it's a long time to keep your focus up.
Valverde was 8th at the Tour de France, despite that disaster on stage 13. Had the flat, lost 10 minutes, exactly what you were talking about.
Well, and sometimes it's been mechanical problems that have taken him out. He's been involved in crashes at the Vuelta. Last year, he was in the jersey. He was taken out in a crosswind crash. You know, sometimes you just can't win. And Valverde is a guy who's got the talent. He just has to put together the right race.
Overall finishing results so far is still Omega Pharma at 30 minutes and 15 seconds. Team Saxo Tinkoff in second with a nice time, 16 seconds off the pace. And it was Team NetApp, the first team to start today, the Pro Continental team, that had the early lead and a nice performance for them as well. Team Sky now approaching the finish line, and this is an excellent performance for Team Sky. Some of their bigger names not here at the Vuelta, but these guys don't care as they are pushing for the line. They will finish just behind Omega Pharma on the last corner. 30 minutes and 21 seconds. They move into the second spot, 6 seconds down.
Really impressive, actually, to see the Sky guys putting in that type of a ride after losing Boassenhagen early in the race. And it's not really a team made up of team time trial specialists by any stretch of the imagination. That bodes really, really well for their GC hopes for Sergio Henao.
I'm sure the riders are glad they put the glass down on top of that surface.
You think?
You know, we don't want to start the race in a cyclocross type atmosphere, as we are now ready for the final team to start. It is Astana. The Kazakhstan team started in 2007. Garmin Sharp now still on course. I believe this is approaching the 20K split. And they're 59 seconds down, 22:56.
Well, not a great start to this third Grand Tour for that squad, but they still will have plenty of opportunities as time wears on to flex their muscles in different ways.
Maxim Aglinsky, the 32-year-old Kazakhstan rider, 9th at the Eneco Tour last weekend. He raced nearly all the spring classics except for Paris-Roubaix. You got Jacob Fuglsang as well, the Danish rider, 7th at this year's tour.
Well, Aglinsky is the man here who is all the way on the left side of this group, but Nibali is the man who's got all the pressure on his shoulders to try and win this third and final Grand Tour of the season.
He has been phenomenal on Italian soil this year. The Vuelta will take a slight jog into France this year, certainly not going to Italy, but in Italian stage races, he won the Giro, and before that, he won the Giro del Trentino, the Tirreno Adriatico. So it was a fantastic spring for Nibali, and he would like to finish the summer off with another Grand Tour win, which would be the 3rd of his career.
He has definitely tasted success in Spain before. This is Cancellara, number 181, as he is the anchor of any team time trial team he gets into.
Well, he has got to be regarded as one of the best single-day or classic racers of his time. He won the Olympic gold in the time trial in 08. I mean, he's won just about everything. Spring, Tour of Flanders, Harelbeke, Paris-Roubaix, 7 stages at the Tour. The list goes on.
And he's really, he's kind of changing his focus this year. Didn't race in the Tour de France. He said he wanted to put a big focus into the World Championships and the end of the season. He's a guy who's always wanted to win not only the time trial at the Worlds, but the road race. He wants to do the double, and he's been close a couple of times, but he's never pulled it off.
Yeah, he's won the time trial World Championships 3 times. Wants to win the double. Last raced here at the Vuelta in 2011. So Radio Shack with a good first intermediate split. We will see how they finish later on. Another Katusha rider off the back.
Isaichev is now going off the back to join Luca Paolini, who's already been dropped. Well, the good news for them is they can ride together, but it's not good for the team to be losing guys relatively early in, but it's just the way it goes in the team time trial. They're going so close to their limit, and now they are down to 5.
But that's exactly what Omega Pharma did with about 7K to go. And I want to say it didn't hurt them because they have the fastest time. But perhaps you will take the opposing view and say it may hurt them in the days to come.
Well, the challenge for this race is they start out with the climb. They have a tricky descent, which we haven't actually got to see yet because Spanish television is not bringing us that descent. And there are a couple of other climbs before the finish. And so some guys go uphill better and they blow the other guys out, and then you have fewer guys to ride with to get the draft off of and rest from.
Radio Shack with quite a few riders at that point. Movistar, we did not see their first intermediate split. Gutierrez has been dropped by the rest of his team, but at that first split at 9.2K, they were second. Sitting
in second, and now they have 8 men left, so still almost a full squad here for Alejandro Valverde. Valverde has got to be one of the biggest danger men for the overall classification. And when you think about some of the other potential favorites like Basso losing over a minute today, not good. But right now, Movistar is really messy. They've got guys all over the road.
And now you're down to 6 riders for Movistar. Somebody gave a wave of the hand, kind of to say, I'm done.
And it can happen so fast when you're going literally 33, 34, 35 miles an hour.
Radio Shack at the 20K split. 7 riders there, 2 seconds off the pace, 21:59, so 7K to go. Can the veteran Radio Shack team of Horner and Cancellara keep it together?
A beautiful job by them. 3 seconds ahead of Sky, 2 seconds behind the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team. Now we're looking down on Nibali's team of Astana. Don't expect to see that type of a ride out of Astana. They're going to be more in damage control today, I think, than trying to go for the stage win.
Boy, I think you've got to be impressed too with NetApp's performance. Right now they're in the 4th spot, the Pro Continental team. Coming to a Grand Tour with something to prove, and they've done a nice job of that. Wearing number 1, Valverde, and the Movistar team.
Well, remember, this is the team that won the opening team time trial last year, that finished on a climb with cobblestones. A very crazy finale it was, but Euskaltel here, this is one of those squads that just tries to limit its losses in the team time trial.
Euskaltel crosses the finish line, currently in the 9th position, 58 seconds off the pace laid down by Omega Pharma. So Omega Pharma, they are still on the hot seat. This is the swan song for the team in orange.
And Sammy Sanchez.
And this is Katusha ahead of them on the course. They started 3rd to last.
So Rodriguez sitting out of the saddle there, last spot. And as I was mentioning earlier, he's done a ton of work with one of his main directors, Valerio Piva, on the time trial discipline. The team has worked a lot on the team time trial discipline as well, and occasionally they've surprised in the team time trial discipline over the last couple of seasons.
At the last split, they were 25 seconds back, so you've got about 3 minutes to go before the finish here for Katusha.
And the individual time trial at this year's Vuelta has a lot of climbing. It's got almost a 2,000-foot climb at the end of stage 11. So that's a good time trial for an individual time trial for Rodriguez. So this is one of those races where if he were ever going to win a Grand Tour, 7 summit finishes plus an uphill time trial, it pretty much suits the Spaniard.
Well, and Rodriguez has won 7 stages of the Vuelta throughout his career. He is one of those riders that in an interview earlier this week said that he thinks it will be wide open until the Angliru stage 20. So even if he does lose some time today, which it looks like he will, he's probably not going to be too concerned.
Yeah, there's so much climbing in this race, and nobody wants to come in losing time here, but you can only get the best you can get out of your team. And it looks like they're down to maybe 6 guys, or is it actually 5? It's 5 guys.
Yeah, another team down to 5 and almost down to 4.
Yeah, you can see just how tricky it is.
And well, he's throwing his left arm out there, but you've got no one else at this point to help you. You have got to just kick it into another gear, and he's lost contact.
Yeah, he's struggling right now to close this down. It looks like Rodriguez will close the gap in front of him. No, now Rodriguez opens the gap. This is the disaster that happens so quickly in a team time trial, but Rodriguez still had the power to close it down. But Moreno still struggling. They may have to ease up for him.
Well, Moreno, 5th here last year. He won a stage back in 2011, and he is hurting.
They have to wait. It's the time of the 5th guy. These guys can finish 3 minutes in front of him. They will get his time. They have to wait for him.
And at this point, who is telling them this? Do they have to just simply look around, or can their director see what is going on?
Yeah, their director's right there in the car. They're in the ear. They're telling them what's going on.
Well, you can see Rodriguez took a look back. Some other teammates are looking back. And this is trouble for Katusha.
And Rodriguez is sitting up.
Rodriguez, yeah.
And Konashev, the director, he's a real hard line, old school, former Russian racer, but he has not whipped his team into shape right now and said, guys, you gotta wait.
So from the brilliant performance of Radio Shack to the disaster here in the final few K for Katusha.
Okay, well, they've come back together now. Now they need to get back on the throttle.
Back down the course. This is Espana at the 20K mark, 21:49. And is that correct? They have the fastest split time at the 20K. They do by 8 seconds.
Wow.
How about that?
Totally impressive to me. It's not the ride I expected out of that team. I really thought they were going to be just having a solid ride in the team time trial. It's not over yet, but that is a brilliant performance.
Okay, now that Katusha is all together, Todd, can you put it into words? How much time do you think that struggle there cost them?
A handful of seconds, you know, probably fewer than 10, but every second does count, and it really frustrates the guys at the same time.
200 meters. Clock is ticking. 30 minutes and 9 seconds. Radio Shack with that time just took the overall lead away from Omega Pharma. Katusha will not challenge it, and they are 49 seconds down. So Joaquin Rodriguez, looking for his first Grand Tour win ever, will have to race starting stage 2 in a deficit.
And I tell you, there are a lot of guys that are going to be happy about that tomorrow. Guys like Chris Horner who want to try and ride into the jersey, and he'll have a nice cushion over Rodriguez.
So we're down to our final 2 teams on course. This is Movistar, started 4 minutes ahead of Astana, and Astana, astonishing perhaps that they have the fastest split at the 20K intermediate. So Movistar now 27.5 minutes. They've got 6 riders, Todd, down to 5 yet.
You can see these guys setting up for the left-hand turn. This is where Moreno was trying to get back on the back end of the Katusha train. And once again, Movistar opening up a little bit of gap through the corners. It's just hard when they're going so incredibly fast to maintain that very tight line through the corners, and so little gaps open up, and then guys have to close them down, and it means he's not getting the rest he needs.
Well, the difference with this part of the course, Todd, versus the earlier portion is you've got plenty of wide roads and plenty of room to work with.
Indeed, it was Valverde on the front who was just drilling it. Now he's come to the back, so he wants every single second he can get as well.
Look at the body language too, putting his shoulders into it. This is a tough start to the Vuelta. You've got to put everything into this, even though this is only on the bike for 30 minutes. This is a big effort. They're going to feel this tomorrow.
Well, just in the last minute, we came in. Movistar was going downhill. They made a left turn. They started going uphill. They went over the top of that hill. They started going downhill again. They turned. Now they're going uphill again. And now they're losing Erviti at this point, and he is gone. They will not see him again. So they're down to 5, but it's all these changes in terrain which make it really hard on the pacing, because you don't just get into a steady rhythm. Guy on the front punches it. Guy on the back may go off the back as they come out of a corner.
Final kilometer for Movistar. Valverde sitting in the second position, right behind Moreno. Time to beat, 30 minutes and 9 seconds. And they are now approaching some of the Katusha riders, and that might have slowed them down a bit as the moto kind of sitting on the horn telling them to get out of the way.
Yeah, you could definitely hear the urgency there on the horn as some guys off the back and they're just riding to finish. Other guys here, they're riding for the time for the general classification.
Boy, what a great scene here in San Sencio, right? On the Atlantic coast, a beautiful town that is swelled in numbers due to this race, of course, and the vacation season. And they're in for a treat here tonight. Radio Shack, and their lead is safe. Movistar trying to limit the damage. They're now in the 4th spot, and how far will they drop? Will they finish 4th, 19 seconds down of Radio Shack? So they did suffer a bit during those last few K.
Yeah, very respectable ride for them, but not the winning performance they had last year. And I think that they will be maybe mildly disappointed with this ride, but, you know, it's not a bad way to start the race overall.
One team left on course. It is Astana. They had the fastest split time by 2 seconds, 20 kilometers in. Sitting in the 2nd spot is Omega Pharma. 6 seconds behind Radio Shack. So Radio Shack and the veteran Chris Horner hoping to wear red either tomorrow or the next day. And at 41 years, Todd, his chances to race in a Grand Tour, this might be it.
Well, the American never ceases to amaze and surprise me. And one of the things I really love about a guy like Chris Horner is he is a competitor through and through. I mean, he came back to Utah just a couple of weeks ago. He hadn't done a race in, I don't know, since March. So you do the math, 5 months. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm here to win. And he almost did. I mean, he was close enough. So when he tells me that he wants to ride into the red jersey as the overall leader tomorrow, I have to believe the man. The question is, can he do it? And this team here, the Astana team, looks like 7 guys left. They had the best time at the 20K mark, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, and they still have 7 guys here. So this could be the new best time.
Fulsang and Grivko and Iglinski and Nibali. So some big names on the Astana team. Seeing if they can start the Vuelta with a win in the team trial, or will it be Radio Shack, excuse me, Cancellara there.
So right now, Chris Horner, when we're thinking of general classification men of the Radio Shack team, about 19 seconds ahead of Valverde, and about 49 seconds roughly ahead of Rodriguez. So that GC battle tomorrow is going to be interesting, there's no doubt.
And there's Chris Horner coming over to congratulate his teammates. Towels around the necks. It's been a satisfying day here. A big smile on Chris Horner's face. You know, when you get to that age, and we've all been there before, right? You seem to really savor.
What are you saying?
You seem to savor and enjoy it a little bit more.
Hey, speak for yourself there, big boy. Indeed,
So,
Chris. You know what? Chris always has a smile on his face. That's he's a positive guy.
Finishing stretch for the day for Astana. 30 minutes and 9 seconds for Radio Shack, and approaching 29.5 for Astana. Vincenzo Nibali, the reigning Giro champion, looking to win the Vuelta for the 2nd time in his career. Won it in 2010. And this would be a nice start if he can get some time on his competitors today.
Yeah, a little bit of strength in numbers with these guys with still 6 riders left.
Final turn.
And it is Nibali on the front. Now he's into the 2nd spot.
So the 5th rider across the line, and yes, Astana moves into the top spot. They win the team time trial, stage number 1 of the Vuelta by 10 seconds. And so Radio Shack is dropped into the 2nd position, and Astana has brought the goods to the Vuelta. A great performance here on the opening day.
Fantastic ride for the Astana guys taking the stage. They will have the first man in the red jersey, and now they have to defend it on the first day, which finishes with a mountain finish tomorrow.
We will take a pause and be back right after this to wrap up day one. And welcome back. Stage number 1 of the Vuelta is in the books, and Team Astana, well, Todd, they saved the best for last. They win the team time trial, and it's a good start to the Vuelta for Vincenzo Nibali and Jakob Fuglsang and the rest of the Astana team.
Yeah, great job by those guys. Now, they did have the benefit of knowing all the other intermediate time checks. It looked like Nibali was going to try and go through that final finish line first, but in the end, it didn't come to pass, so he will not be the man in the red leader's jersey, as it's a team effort that gets them the win today.
The results from stage number 1, Astana 29:59. It is Radio Shack second place, 10 seconds back. Omega Pharma is 16 seconds down. Sky with a good performance, and then Movistar is 29 seconds down. Pontevedra finishes up in Bayona and has that nasty finish on the uphill climb. They will go along the coast, so we could have winds playing a factor again today.
Indeed, early in the race with some coastal winds and the Category 3 climb, but then back to the coast and then away from the coast to the Category 1 climb, as you mentioned, to Bayona. And that climb goes up just about 2,000 feet in just under 7 miles. And wait for it, bam, there it is. Now, it's not the toughest summit finish of this year's race, but it's only the second day, and the guys are still trying to find their legs.
And we are now looking at live pictures of stage number 2. This is the peloton, Astana in the light blue jerseys up front, trying to protect Nibali and the red leader's jersey, Lampre in the pink right there with them. We do have a breakaway group of 3 riders who got away early. You are looking at them right now. Francisco Armendia, the 26-year-old. The Lotto rider is Gregory Henderson, and the Garmin rider is Alex Rasmussen, the Danish rider of 29 years old. He's a good time trialist, and Henderson actually, he won a stage here of the Vuelta back in 2009, and with inside of 100 kilometers to go, they had their lead stretched out to over 12 minutes.
A huge advantage for those guys. And, you know, it's always great to see Henderson in a move, because he's a guy who's really the lead-out man for Andre Greipel. Greipel not in this race, so Henderson has been given the free hand to try and win some stages. Now, I would expect him to try and win them from a field sprint, not from a breakaway like this, but it's always good to see the Kiwi out front.
What's at stake in today's stage number 2? You see the jerseys, the overall leader in red, points in green, and then the mountain leader, that's white with blue polka dots.
Indeed, and they'll be testing those legs in the mountains at the finish today. And we'll also see if Brajkovic holds on to that red leader's jersey, or if it possibly swaps shoulders to his teammate and team leader Vincenzo Nibali. They're tied on time coming into the day. Or if a guy like Horner, who comes in 10 seconds down, or other guys manage to pick up that little bit of time they need. Remember, a 10-second time bonus on the finish, 10, 6, and 4 for the top 3 places.
That breakaway of 3, not too much of a worry right now for the peloton, because you do have the peloton has not been broken up. They can work together if need be, and you do have that uphill finish. None of these 3 riders are considered a GC contender. Caja Rural, that is Armendia in the green and white, and then the Lotto rider in the middle, and then it is Rasmussen in the jersey.
Indeed, and these guys, you know, these are tough ways to make your living in a 3-man break when you got a giant peloton behind you. 65K to go for them, and you can see just how much Rasmussen is grinding away on the front, taking a big long pull. He's got Henderson sitting on his wheel, saving about 1/3 the energy that Rasmussen is putting out by being in the draft. So think about how important that is. And Henderson goes by, and they're having a little word. If you're in the peloton and there are 195 guys in the peloton, a lot of guys are in the draft, very few are in the wind. These guys have to share that workload all day long.
Armendia and Rasmussen getting a bite to eat. Well, he may have been just checking out his map, but they just went through the feed zone. not too long ago, right before we came on air.
Now he's eating his map.
Yeah, that's what it looked like, didn't it? Or he had some food wrapped up in the map.
Yeah, they often do a little piece of like aluminum foil, and their soigneurs, which are the people that give them massages every day, that stand in the feed zones and hand up the musette bags with their food, prepare their food and their drinks. Those soigneurs in the evening and the morning before the race, they actually, some of them make these little sandwiches. All teams have different systems and riders like different things, but they come up with what works for their team.
As you can tell, it's a beautiful day of racing in Spain. The three riders have a nice lead, but there is over 63 kilometers for the peloton and our main leaders to reel it in. Gregory Henderson for Lotto, stage winner of the Vuelta 4 years ago, has also won a number of stages: Paris-Nice, the Eneco Tour, Volta a Catalunya.
Now, Henderson's a very, very able sprinter. And interestingly, at the intermediate sprint, the first one that they went through, Rasmussen took the top honors there, and Henderson took second place. So it makes me think that maybe Henderson was not necessarily going full out for that sprint, but honestly, Rasmussen's pretty darn fast too. And so sometimes you just never know sort of how they play each other a little bit. And there's a lot of tactics going on in the bike race at all times.
Number of Lampre riders up in the front. Scarponi, their main GC threat for this year's Vuelta, 56 seconds down coming into today's stage number 2.
Yeah, another of the men who suffered from that team time trial. And unfortunately for him, he's one of the GC guys who can be a real contender in a race like this with a lot of uphill finishes. So his team doing a lot of work on the front right now. It just tells me that we're going to see some fireworks on the final climb. If Scarponi's team is on the front, and you know he's down quite a bit. Katusha lost 59 seconds with Rodriguez. He's very explosive. We're going to see some guys swinging in the final 7 miles.
Beautiful aerial footage of this portion of Spain, as the riders will be on the coast for a fairly sizable portion of today's stage number 2 before they head inland to the finish. And Bayona, known as the first community in Europe to receive news back in 1493 that Christopher Columbus had discovered the New World. How about that?
Well, that's the old news right there. Certainly love to show it off.
Well, with all the damage done in yesterday's team time trial, you get the feeling, Gogo, that you will have some teams that are really going to be not only licking their chops for the finish, but licking their wounds as well. How often do you come into a Grand Tour, and if you are one of the favorites, and you haven't been in a crash, lose over a minute? Now, we should point out, we did not find this out until after yesterday's coverage, that Gardner Sharp did have a crash in yesterday's team time trial, and so their main GC contender, Dan Martin, a long shot for the podium. The Irishman has had a fantastic year so far, but he comes into today with a deficit of 141.
Yeah, it's really a tough day for the American Garmin Sharp squad yesterday. And like you said, we didn't know it because they didn't have a TV camera with them. There are only a few motorcycles out there with cameras, and they pick who they're going to follow, and they missed it. But I spoke with Bingen Fernandez, the director, earlier today, and I asked him what happened. He said they were flying on the initial descent. He was telling the guys through their race radios, guys, just hold back a little bit. We don't want to have any crashes on this descent. It's tricky, it's narrow. And all of a sudden, guys started flying off the road. Michael Kretter is in the race today, covered with road rash on his hips and elbows. He woke up, he said he felt better, but unfortunately, Coldo Fernandez broke a rib. They brought him to the start this morning. He was actually going to try and start, but he was dizzy, and Bingen said he was pale. So they said, look, dude, we're not going to let you race.
So we have 2 racers that have already dropped out of the Vuelta. Teo Boss, the sprinter for Belka, did not even start. this year's Vuelta on stage number 1. So we will step away for a pause and return to stage 2 coverage of the Vuelta.
Can't imagine we will not see him figuring into some breakaways.
Now we are approaching the intermediate sprint for our front 3. Not much of a breeze on the day, just perhaps a little bit, but it looks like we've got great racing conditions, nor do we see what seems to be too much of, I guess, a desperation at this point for these intermediate sprints. I mean, is it that big a deal for these 3 riders to get these points?
Well, what's happening is Armendia is leading, so he has no interest in them. Henderson sitting on the back is trying to mark Rasmussen, so he will work on his timing. He basically wants to get to the point where hopefully Rasmussen goes early, he can ride the wheel for a bit and then come out of the draft. Or if Rasmussen waits, then Hendy will jump when he thinks he can accelerate all the way to the line. That's sort of the timing issue with sprinting.
And so Armendia now getting in the back of the front 3. He has done his pull. Remember that there are not that many points available for these intermediate sprints. So unless some of these 3 riders are near the finish, they will in all likelihood not be wearing the green points leaders jersey tomorrow. 25 points for the stage winner.
Yeah, quite often in a race such as the Vuelta, with all these uphill finishes, you would actually potentially see one of the general classification men in that points jersey at the end of the race. A guy like Joaquin Rodriguez, who contests so many of those finishes, he racks up tons of points on the summit finishes.
Bit of an uphill approach to the intermediate sprint.
Well, everybody's coming out, that's for sure. Great crowd. As they still make their way toward that banner, and there it is. All right, let's see what the games are now.
Rasmussen in blue in the Garmin jersey, Henderson in between, and then it's Armendia in the green for Caja Rural.
Well, let's see if this is contested. We know that Rasmussen and Henderson went through in that order in the first one, but that was actually before the television cameras came up for the day. And Henderson's going to jump him here, so it's on, and there's no doubt the Kiwi wants it, and he's not going to be beaten.
Henderson, the Lotto rider, winner of a stage here at the Vuelta, times it perfectly, and Rasmussen just simply had no chance of matching that burst of energy from Henderson, the 36-year-old veteran from New Zealand, who picks up some more sprint points. And now, more importantly, what is the gap between our front 3 breakaway riders and the peloton with all of our GC leaders? We will find out when we come back. Your Giro winner are coming in with a deficit on day number 2. You can see the brown and blue and white checkered jerseys of AG2R, and their young rider Carlos Bentancur, the Colombian, the 23-year-old. He lost nearly 2 minutes yesterday.
Yeah, Roman Kreuziger, number 201, the leader of that Saxo Tinkoff squad. He didn't come out too badly scathed, but did lose just a little bit of time for him. 32 seconds down.
So 28.4 kilometers to go. So we are about 17K to go before they start the climb up the Monte de Grova. And the wind is still blowing. Now the peloton getting stretched out a bit, as the teams you would think, certainly Astana, would start to work in earnest to reel these 3 in.
And notice how we continue to see the speeds are quite a bit slower now. It's because there are a lot of these false flats. And so the guys are having these uphills that are hard to distinguish, but you can certainly feel them. 6:04 now the gap, so it's definitely coming down.
Well, it was right around 7 minutes before we took that last break, so over just the last few kilometers they've lost a minute. We still have Lampre at the front 2 riders, then Johnny Hogerland. Bregovic, our leader in red, and Astana, their entire team there. Well, we saw some rough teamwork yesterday in that time trial in the last few kilometers. Some guys just were not ready to go. And for Katusha, it was surprising. A guy like Daniel Moreno, who struggled so much. What a surprise.
Yeah, sometimes it just, if you're off the littlest bit in a team time trial, you are going to be in for a ride that you want to forget as quick as possible, because you are going to be put to the task so quickly and held there for the entire duration until you get dropped.
If you're curious, the last man to win the Giro and the Vuelta in the same year was Alberto Contador back in 2008. A notable absentee from this year's Vuelta.
Yeah, he just said he didn't have the stuff to do another three-week race after the Tour de France. And I totally relate to that. And this is Bauke Mollema, the Sky man out of the saddle, leader for that squad. Yeah, he's just chilling, riding at the back with a bunch of his teammates. No stress. He'll be feeling a little bit of stress later on, because everybody who wants to be in the general classification is going to have to get up to the front, fight for position into that final climb of 11 kilometers, and then have the legs to make it happen as well. You were just talking about some of the teams that struggled a little bit yesterday in the team time trial, and Sky actually put together a very nice ride, but they lost Edvald Boassenhagen really early, which was a real surprise to me, because he is such a good bike racer. And when I talked with his director this morning, Nicolas Portal, that was one of the questions I asked him. And I just said, look, was that actually stemming from his broken scapula in the Tour de France in July, and still, you know, coming back from that? And he said, yeah, he lost a lot of training from that. He has not done a single race day until yesterday from the Tour de France. And so he just didn't have the intensity. And there's one thing to have all the endurance from your training and be ready for a 3-week tour through that. But to be able to go the speed they have to go in a team time trial for your first day back, that's a big ask.
That was stage 12 where he broke his scapula. Now you see the bare hands of Rasmussen. Okay, I got to ask you, most of the guys are wearing their gloves when they're riding. He's not. Why? Okay, well, there are a lot of reasons for that. It's actually a pretty interesting question. Some guys like the dexterity they have without gloves. So, for instance, Fabian Cancellara, you watch him in a time trial, he'll virtually always have bare hands. He feels he has better control of the bike. He can rail the corners better, shift more crisply, and so on. Other guys will wear the gloves because of the padding, because of the crash protection. And oh, by the way, it typically has the sponsor name on it as well. So it's just another way to do the favor that your sponsor wants. The sponsors put in millions of dollars into these teams, and that's why these guys are plastered everywhere with Lotto Belisol or Garmin Sharp or Caja Rural. There's a lot of money behind these teams. Johnny Hogerland there in the front with some of the Lampre riders. What is his motivation today? He's coming in 350 down. He's not a guy that's going to challenge for the GC, and now it looks like his time of pulling up at the front is done, because he's almost looks like he's reaching and pressing down on his talkback, and perhaps either getting some instruction or telling his director, you know, I'm done. Well, I think probably what's happening with Hogerland is he's headed back to the team car now to go pick up more bottles or just chat with the director. Actually, in the final 50K, you're not allowed to take anything from the car, so maybe that was more just a discussion. And their man for the general classification is probably Liwa Westra, but you know, you would say that coming in, but he's 409 down, right? And so he had a rough day. So I think the team is really looking for opportunities for stages at this point. Wout Poels is their high man on the GC at 118 down. And if you ever wonder how to stretch the quadricep while you're racing, take a good look at that right there. You basically stick that foot up on the saddle, and Angel Vicioso giving us a nice display. You don't typically do that in the finale when everybody's pushing and shoving, but you see guys do that a little bit before that final climb, back of the field. Probably you don't want to do it either going 20 miles an hour with 100 other riders right around you. We'll take one final break here, and the finish of today's stage 2 coming up. 5K now to the climb up the Monte de Grova. And will there be quite a bit of, let's say, anxiety or pressure to get near the front at the start of the climb? Or is that really only in the case of a shorter climb and a more of a kind of a climbing sprint finish? In other words, will there be much of a race to get to the front in the peloton as they start up their climb?
I think you could say anxiety would be understating what guys are going through right now in the peloton. This is the first summit finish of 11 summit finishes. So look at how fast the peloton is going right now. They're absolutely ripping. This is probably almost 40 miles an hour. And they know that setting up for this climb sets the tone for their general classification rider for the rest of the race. This is a huge setup right now, and it is going to be absolutely blistering and a lot of fighting getting to that base.
Cannondale in green doing a hard pull at the front moments ago for Basso. The gap now between the peloton and our breakaway of 3 is under 4 minutes. And with such a long climb, there could be quite a bit of suffering for that front three. And this also as well, we need to get back to this point. This is going to be really illuminating to see which of our GC contenders has got their climbing legs set to go.
Yeah, illuminating is a great way to describe it, because there's basically going to be a giant spotlight as things thin out and separate on that climb. I have to think Joaquin Rodriguez is going to come out with both pistols loaded and just be taking the big shots at everybody, because he loves the uphill finishes. But Valverde has graded him, and then of course Sergio Henao, the Sky Rider, the Colombian, he's got something he wants to prove. And Nibali, all he has to do is mark those guys, so he can be conservative. He can follow the wheels and then just finish with them and hold the jersey for his team.
21 stages in this year's Vuelta, 13 of them are mountain stages. 11, over half, have mountaintop finishes. Amazing.
3 minutes now, the gap, so the breakaway is absolutely doomed. Argo Shimano now come to the front.
The gap exactly 3 minutes. When we come back from this break, we will stay through the finish of stage 2.
Now it's Katusha there and Lotto Belisol.
Excuse me, Todd. I was just going to say that we will stay with you commercial free through the finish of stage number 2. And that climb starts at about 11.1 thereabouts. So coming up shortly.
Yeah, really shortly. Now remember, the breakaway has a little over a minute on these guys, but everybody's going to be on that climb real soon. And it starts out hard, so it really starts to stretch the legs very early. 8.3% very early on in the climb.
Well, these three have done a fantastic job today. I think it's no longer a question of if they will get caught, but when.
Yeah, we just saw those cars coming out of the gap. So here they are. They're on the base of the climb, over 8% where they are, where the peloton is flat and very fast.
A couple tight turns and they will start climbing as well. 2,000 feet, 6.8 miles. Now you've got Omega Pharma at the front of the peloton. We have seen Zdeněk Štýbar in the Eneco Tour for Omega Pharma, who is an excellent finisher when the stages end uphill.
Yeah, do not discount Zdeněk Štýbar after what we saw the Czech Republic rider do at the Eneco Tour, which ended just last weekend. He was really on fire. He was the revelation of that race.
Yeah, now the climb in earnest. Rasmussen staying down, but Armendia and Henderson out of the saddle, and so you've got a Lotto rider in Henderson in the breakaway. Surprising to see Lotto trying to push the pace at the front of the peloton?
No, because they're just at that point, they're fighting for position. They know Henderson's not going to do well, and in fact, he's already been popped. So it's really about being in position. You don't want to be 50 guys back here in the melee.
So Movistar, Katusha, and FDJ at the front, and in a matter of moments, Henderson will get caught. So now the breakaway of 3 has been dropped to 2. It is Armendia and Rasmussen.
Pablo Lastras, the man on the front right now for the Movistar team. A very loyal domestique. Occasionally he gets a shot and pulls off a big win himself, but usually this is what he does. He sits on the front, he rides until he can't pedal anymore, and then Alejandro Valverde or one of his other team leaders takes over.
Valverde with 29 seconds to make up on Nibali. Doesn't obviously need to get much of it today. Many of these riders have pointed to the penultimate stage, stage 20, that nasty climb.
Yeah, the Angliru is brutal. And there's Henderson on the right side of your screen, so he has been picked up from the breakaway, and he'll just put it in the easy gear here, I'm assuming, and ride it in. And
now you've got two Movistar riders up at the front, but many of those riders thought that the Vuelta will not be decided until that stage 20, and that obviously yet to be seen with 11 mountaintop finishes. Clearly, you have to have your climbing legs at the Vuelta to do well.
And so, Peter, do you ever wonder kind of if their muscle group use changes on a climb to a flat road, or do you not worry about things like that?
I do not worry about things like that, but I will tee you up and say, yes, I wonder all the time. Explain it to me,
Well,
please.
you know, here's the deal. When you start climbing, you actually end up probably engaging your hamstrings just a little bit more and your glutes a little bit more. The faster your cadence, the less you're going to be able to engage your hamstrings, because it's hard to pull up. It's an unnatural feeling. But the cadence typically comes down just a little bit on the climb, so you get a little bit more hamstring and glute in there and take a little bit of the pressure off of the quads. But overall, you're always going to bias the quads as a bike racer.
10K to go, and our two breakaway riders now with about a 10-second gap. Let me build on that point. When you then get out of the saddle, what's the difference there in terms of the cadence going uphill and what muscle groups you're using?
So typically when a guy gets out of the saddle, notice how fast Rasmussen is pedaling, and he jumped out of the saddle there just for a second. It's hard to be out of the saddle with a really high cadence. So typically before you get out of the saddle, you go into one gear harder. This is about 10% right here, and the field is right on him.
So it's been a fantastic day off the front for Armendia and Rasmussen, and they are now caught with just under 10K to go. And as Movistar just swiftly rides on by, you can see one of the lead rider there kind of give a look over and perhaps a little nod to, hey, good effort, guys. Oh, there's a crash at the back between Euskaltel and AG2R, and some words are exchanged. And, boy, you've just got to be paying attention, and I don't think the Euskaltel rider was.
Yeah, there are definitely some words exchanged back there. And those guys really were already out of the stage, but still, it's, you know, your tempers flare in these moments. You're in pain, and then a guy takes you out. This is Fabian Cancellara, so he was wearing that green jersey as the points leader for leading his team across first in the second place yesterday. Caja Rural continuing to put the pressure on. Love the style of these guys.
Cannot see the number for this rider yet, but they had Armendia in the front all day long, and now one of his teammates takes a pop off of the front. You talked about it, about being animated. You're a wild card. You want to get into this race and make sure that that jersey is right here in front of the camera as much as it can be.
Yeah, Ames Chiruka actually used to ride for the Euskaltel squad, but he's come over to the Caja Rural squad. Maybe he's got a little bone to pick, and he says, hey, I used to be on a World Tour team. Now I'm on a Pro Continental team. Let me show you what I have, fellas.
138 down coming into today.
Yeah, this guy always on the attack, Chiruka. 9K to go.
And he is looking back, Todd. He is really putting in a big push at this point to get a separation. And if the Motocam can get in front, we'll just kind of see how much of a success he has had. So he's got a few seconds on the peloton.
Indeed, and this is one of those spots where it levels out just a bit. It's at about 5% here. It's going to pitch up to 10%, not soon ahead of him. And that's when we'll really be able to see how good his legs are.
Now the peloton strung out.
And if you're back, let's say you're back 20 guys right now, you may never actually be able to get to the front again, because it's going so fast and so hard, and if you move up, you have to get out in the wind. And just to move up, then you blow yourself up and you can't follow the move. So that's why the guys have to fight for the position at the bottom.
And how patient do these riders have to be at this point? Those working for Valverde, Rodriguez, and Vincenzo Nibali.
They got to be patient, but they also have to be in communication. And Nibali right now sitting in the 3rd spot. He's the 2nd light blue rider for the Astana team. And he was just getting some water in the system.
A couple of Vacansoleil riders up as well. FDJ. Still Movistar at the front. There were 2 riders there moments ago. Now just 1. Pushing the pace, trying to mark any moves, working for Valverde.
And it looked to me like Jakob Fuglsang was up there with Nibali as well.
Well, if you find yourself at the back there and you're just about to give up, or you do, what goes through your mind? I mean, when do you reach that point where you say, I'm done?
You want to look for the views like we just had. That's what goes through your mind. You got to think of pleasant things. And it is Fuglsang there on the left side of your screen. Working for Nibali. We don't see the red jersey right now of Yanni Brajkovic.
Fuglsang 7th at this year's Tour de France. 4th at the Dauphiné.
Yeah, he's the real deal. There's no doubt. I mean, that team is loaded. If you look at the talent they have in there, they've got good talent for the flat roads to protect Vincenzo, and they got good talent to help him out in the mountains as well. And you can see the suffering going on right there. That was Daniele Ratto, I believe, for the Cannondale squad, and just going back like a rock.
I believe that was 76, so Maciej Peterski.
Oh, it was Peterski, okay.
Who did a nice job at stage 7 of the Eneco Tour. He was in that 3-man breakaway.
Indeed.
And had a nice finish there last Saturday.
Yeah, you'll see Vikinen there in the white jersey for FDJ, just going out the back. The white with the blue plus as the Finnish national road champion. He'll be saying goodbye to the peloton right about now.
So a couple Cannondale riders get dropped off the back on this severe finish to stage number 2. What a creative and challenging start to this year's Vuelta. So many climbing stages, and they couldn't wait. They had to get to it right away.
Yeah, what about Jose Arada on the front right now for Movistar? He's been up there for a long time, just putting in a really nice, steady, and very hard tempo. Here's Brajkovic, the leader from yesterday.
So I think it's fairly obvious what's in the cards for him. He will not wear that red jersey tomorrow. And he said as much, that he's out there to work for Vincenzo. So 7.5K to go to the finish.
And hey, now out of this group, and this is not a small group. We're not talking 10 guys. We're looking at like 50 guys right now that have ridden away from Sergio Henao.
Underneath the 4K banner. So Sky now has got one of their GC contenders who has already found himself in a world of hurt. 22 seconds down on the day. But if he does not pick it up, he's going to lose a lot more on stage 2 as Movistar.
26 miles an hour right there. 26 miles an hour with 5 Movistar men on the front.
Back to Brajkovic. At the back. And Henao might even be behind him.
And Brajkovic is still struggling, but look at Sylvester Schmid. One on top of the Mont Ventoux years ago in the Dauphiné. A few years back, the only Polish rider ever to do that. And heck, there aren't very many guys who can claim winning on the Ventoux.
Well, there are many ways to get to the top of this mountain. There's one, and we're going to follow these guys.
Oh,
Muscatel, boy, look at that. That's not a good sight.
Yeah, they brought 3 men back to help Sammy Sanchez, and they just hope that he'll ride into this after today.
Well, you got 4 Movistar riders up at the front, and it looks to me that Chris Horner is on his own.
Yeah, Chris Horner's sort of dangling in there right behind. He's off to the left shoulder to our right of the green jersey of Basso. He's out in a little bit of wind. Does not have a lot of help right now, unfortunately.
You're surprised with 3K to go that you still have this many riders up front?
You know, I am a little bit surprised. I thought that the earlier part of the climb might blow it up, but they came into it, remember, pretty darn fresh. And David Arroyo, let's see if he is still in the lead group. He is. He's hanging on the back. And that's Popovich there next to him. One of the men who does a lot of work in the Radio Shack team. It's going to be very hard for anybody to truly break up this group because there's so many guys here and we haven't seen any testing attacks yet. And it takes a bunch of attacks to really shake it up, and they're getting close to the finish with this many guys. Look at the two NetApp men up there in the front as well as Leopold Koenig, number 151. He can be very good on uphill finishes, and he was right there with a teammate.
NetApp with a nice performance yesterday in the team time trial. They went off first, held the lead for a while. So those two wildcard teams, the NetApp and Cahu Rual, have done a nice job today as well of making sure that their presence is known. But I'm so impressed with Valverde, but not impressed with A now, 39 seconds back. And you saw one of the teammates from Valverde.
That was Schmid, yeah. Sylvester Schmid, who just did that massive turn on the front. He'll lose 10 minutes now in the final 2 kilometers. You just look at the results tonight.
So now Valverde with 2 teammates left with 2K to go to the finish. 37 kilometers an hour.
That's amazing. I mean, they're going uphill at speeds in excess of 20 miles an hour right now. Wicked.
So you've got the Movistar riders, Astana, NetApp, and Chris Horner with 2K to go, along with Roman Kreuziger. Or Saxo Tinkoff has moved back just a bit. But you are right, Todd. We have yet to see anybody make an attack.
Well, at this speed, it's almost committing suicide to attack because the guys are getting so much draft back in this group. And so attacking now probably means you just shoot yourself in the foot, and everybody's just trying to stay onto this infernal tempo being set by Movistar.
Is it too steep at the finish to have a uphill sprint finish, or is that what we're looking at?
We might be looking at a pretty big group that just sort of comes unglued literally in the final kilometer or the final 500 meters. We might get some small little gaps. And now Koenig looks like he's striking out for NetApp, so he's going for it. He's going to go long.
Leo Koenig for NetApp with 1.4K to go. Takes off, looks back, sees if anybody's going to mark him. You've got the 2 Movistar riders now, with Nibali for Astana right behind him.
Oh, that takes some nerve, let me tell you. The pace these guys are going up the mountain to try and strike out on your own. Absolutely massive confidence.
Just over a kilometer to go to the finish. The Czech rider won a stage of the Tour of California earlier this year. This would be a huge victory for not only him, but his team as well.
Oh, this is exactly how he won in California. He was with all the leaders on the big climb on Diablo, and he said, all right, fellas, you can look at each other. I'm going up the road for the stage.
Boy, what a fantastic turn of events for the opening weekend for Team NetApp, the German Pro Continental team. This is their debut at the Vuelta. They have yet to win a Grand Tour stage. Here is Rodriguez now.
Yeah, Rodriguez, we knew he was going to be going for it.
Daniel Moreno for Katusha. So is that not Rodriguez?
I think it was Rodriguez from what I could see there, but we'll get another look at his face momentarily.
Yeah, Rodriguez is number 121. Moreno is 127.
That's Rodriguez.
Be surprised if it was Moreno. It's got to be Rodriguez. With under a kilometer to go to the finish here. The first uphill finish of 11 at this year's Vuelta. So a couple riders have gotten away from this big group. You've got 4 riders now. So you've got Koenig up in front, and then you've got Rodriguez, Saxo Tinkoff, and an AG2 rider. Is that Betancourt?
I actually may be saying that is Moreno. I thought it was Rodriguez, but I got a better look at his face there. It is, in fact, Moreno. My eyes failed me, and Nicholas Roche is the man for Saxo Bank up there.
And Pozzovivo, Domenico Pozzovivo for AG2R.
And Pozzovivo his team said coming into the race, he's here for the GC, and now he goes on the attack.
Pozzovivo off the left side of the road, and so it is Koenig who matches him. And it is the Katusha runner who keeps looking back saying, where are you, Rodriguez? And now Pozzovivo continues out of the saddle.
And Pozzovivo has a degree in economics, and he's a classical pianist, but here comes Nicholas Roach. Roach really needs a Grand Tour stage victory.
Roach on the left side of the road, and he has timed it perfectly now as they approach the finish line here of stage 2. Nicholas Roach, 4 hours and 36 minutes in the saddle. Katusha now in second.
And here comes Moreno. Can Moreno do it? I don't think so. It looks like Roach is going to get this.
Nicholas Roach, a huge win for him if he can hang on. There's a bit of a downhill slope, and he will win stage 2 of the Vuelta. Wow, what a surprise.
Yeah, fantastic riding by the Irishman, as all sorts of upsets there at the end. And now we see it looks like it is indeed Valverde leading everybody else across. So we'll see what happens here in the general classification.
Well, Nicholas Roach was 32 seconds down after yesterday's stage 1. He'll get a few time bonuses, but it seems like the big loser on the day was Anow for Sky, and the winner is Saxo Tinkoff, and a fantastic win for Nicholas Roach as he takes the uphill finish here on stage 2. We'll take a pause and continue to wrap things up right after this. The successful finish of stage 2 for Nicholas Roach, the 29-year-old Irishman, 12th here last year, 7th overall in 2010, picks up his first Grand Tour stage win.
A beautiful job by him. Look at the gap he had over Moreno into the final couple hundred meters. And at this point, it looks so easy from above, but I can tell you, the body is absolutely on fire, but propelled by that victory that's looming just in front of you.
Pozzovivo for AG2R finishes 3rd on the day, and Leo Koenig for Team NetApp finishes 4th. So for 2 straight days, Team NetApp has done a nice job, and for a pro-continental team, they have certainly made their presence known. So here are the results on the day. Moreno 2 seconds back, Pozzovivo 6 seconds, and then it is Leopold and Alejandro Valverde. So the best finish for one of our GC contenders. His team did a fantastic job on the climb.
And it is a gorgeous day along the Galician coast in northwestern Spain. Blue water and sunny skies for the 3rd day of the season's 3rd Grand Tour. And the overall standings after a very busy first weekend, Vincenzo Nibali, the Giro champion, is the leader by 8 seconds over Nicholas Roach, with American Chris Horner in 3rd, just 10 seconds off the pace. Stage 3 on tap for today in northwestern Spain, twisting and turning, flat most of the way, but not at the finish.
And all those twists and turns, as you mentioned, up against and around the beautiful Galician coast, so a lot of wind. And the climb at the finish, it's not a big one. It shouldn't see major general classification changes, Steve, but it just is another nervous finale for the guys, and the guys that are good at getting up about a 2.5-mile climb will be going for a stage win.
And we are now live with a 5-man breakaway that has so far shaped this first Monday at the Vuelta a Espana. No riders who are long-term threats on the general classification. You see the names right here: Luca Dodi, Vicente Reines, Fabrizio Ferrari, Cyril Bessi, and Pablo Urrasun are the 5 riders, 2 of which are Spaniards in the break today. This is the peloton that is sitting in behind them. No real chase at the moment. The largest the gap has gone up to is just over 5 minutes, so everything under control, settled for the day at this point, and everybody just rolling along after a couple of pretty active days with the team time trial on stage 1 and the climbing that unfolded on stage number 2 yesterday.
And Steve, I don't know if you just noticed, but the flag they just came by, the Spanish flag, The wind is definitely howling coming off of the coastline, so it makes for stressful days for the guys in the peloton. Even though there's not a dangerous breakaway, there's always that potential for something to happen in a crosswind in a split or a crash.
So much of the stage is along the gorgeous coast in northwestern Spain, and the prevailing wind for most of today's route will be a headwind. Now, when they come down to the end and the final 4Ks, which go uphill, that would be a tailwind. So it opens up a lot of different possibilities for the way the stage could go.
Indeed, tailwind climbs are the hardest to follow the guys that are explosive because you don't get any draft. And so those tailwind climbs do make a difference. But once again, look at the wind.
All right, well, let's take a look at what's at stake here in the Vuelta on this Monday. Will Vincenzo Nibali defend that red jersey all the way to Madrid in 3 weeks? Can Nicholas Roche continue to hold the climbing and points jerseys? And what about Sammy Sanchez and Sergio Henao? There is so much that has happened in these first couple of days. And let's begin with Nibali and the possibility of him holding that red jersey. We rarely see a leader at a Grand Tour go almost wire to wire, especially one with this much climbing that is still to come.
Yeah, a lot of tests for Nibali, but they passed the test with flying colors so far on Team Espana, winning the team time trial, and they weren't even considered one of the favorites going into that first stage in the TTT, 17 miles, 27 kilometers. All the team directors I spoke with were talking about Radio Shack and Omega Pharma and other teams, so they surprised there. It showed their depth, and then they continued to do very well on the first summit finish yesterday. So Nibali's got a powerful team, and if there's anybody in the race who could do it, it would be him. But it's a big ask. There are a lot of summit finishes to come, 10 more, including today.
The margin to the breakaway has come down from its largest point of over 5 minutes, just over 2 minutes ahead of this peloton right now. Still a long way out, almost 76 kilometers to the finish. And what about Henao and Iran, especially Sergio Henao, forgetting to eat on the second day of a Grand Tour might catch some people by surprise.
Yeah, well, it caught him by surprise, there's no doubt. So here's how that works. You're in the bike race. It's the first time you're the leader of your team, a powerhouse team, Team Sky, in a Grand Tour. And so you have all the nerves to go with everything else in the racing. And even the best pros in the world have done that. Alberto Contador has lost stage races that way. It just happens sometimes. But Henao is the less experienced of the two Colombians on that team. Rigoberto Urán, his friend, his compatriot, his roommate, is really trying to teach Henao more, and being a leader of this Grand Tour is part of that teaching process.
Now, this is Fabian Cancellara working his way back up through the cars, it looks like here. Cancellara for the Radio Shack Leopard team, who is building towards the World Championship time trial in just about a month in Florence. So into the second half of his season and using the Vuelta as preparation for that TT at the Worlds.
Oh, look at that. He's moving right up through there on this little congested part of the course where all the cars slow down. He just kind of rolls on through. I tell you, working that caravan like a professional, like Cancellara does, you can save a lot of energy. If you panic back in that caravan, then you use a lot of energy trying to get up to the field too fast. But if you just take your time, he's there chatting with the BMC director, no big deal, you know, take a little push here, draft a little there, and get up into the field.
Cancellara skipping the Tour de France this year because time trialing was not all that important. And now trying to make it back to this peloton with just under 75K to go on stage number 3.
Just chilling at the back there after a pretty rough day yesterday. We'll see if he can find the legs that he was missing yesterday. But Steve, to your point, the UCI points, in addition to the fact that a guy is moving to another team, and he takes the majority of those points with him, and the points are part of how the teams are granted the World Tour license to race in all the biggest races. So there are all sorts of conflicting motivations out there, and you can get some weird results from that.
There should just be a rule that you cannot announce a new team until the end of a season. I know that riders will know inside the peloton and that the information won't be kept totally under wraps, but there should just be some system by which you can't announce things until the end of the year, because you don't see it in any other sport. You wouldn't see Tom Brady saying, hey, I'm going to the New York Giants midway through an NFL season.
No, they should have a rule that you can't take your feet out of your shoes either during the race.
But hey, if Steph Clement from the Belkin team has the dexterity to do it and still ride along, more power to him.
Yep, just so long as that orthotic doesn't fall out on the road, right?
And look how much the gap has gone back up. They've let them stretch it out to an additional minute from its lowest point, with 63 kilometers now left to ride.
Well, the games the Peloton can play with the breakaway. It's a fine line between going too hard and not going hard enough. And sometimes you see them make the error at the end, and that breakaway does stay away, and the guys get the big payoff for being out there all day. But it's pretty rare.
Just toying with the breakaway at this point. And as you mentioned, we saw the BMC rider come up and talk to Omega Pharma Quickstep and telling him to ease back, slow it down. And you never know who exactly has the authority to control the speed and the pace of the peloton. So you always want to get everybody on the same page. You just hope that everybody has the same goals, the same objectives, because, we have a crash. Sky, Caja Rural, FDJ, and Garmin among the teams involved back here.
And a seemingly very innocuous part of the race, and can make a big change in an instant.
A couple of Sky Riders, it looks like. Oh, that's Sergio A. now, number 191. His troubles just continue.
Luke Rowe was there with him. I think there may have actually been a third Sky man down as well. Salvatore Puccio, yep, as well. And he's getting a wheel now.
Antonio Piedra of the Caja Rural team, number 67, is there. But boy, Sergio A. now, a couple of days in a row after forgetting to eat yesterday, had a puncture earlier in this stage, and now a crash. And it's right at the back of the field.
Sergio A. now right on the left side of your screen in the black colors of Sky, just starting to stand up. But look at all the teammates he has around him. Doesn't look like his teammates crashed, but he had 3 teammates there to help him out, get him going again. And the Puccio waited for the wheel.
The American Caleb Fairley is there for the Garmin Sharp team. Doesn't look like he crashed. He was just caught behind it.
But Sergio A. now, number 191 there, just getting a push off. Has not been a good first couple of days for him.
Boy, sometimes you just get a sign that it's not going to be your race. And for Sergio A. now, that's 3 things in the first 3 days that have been trouble for him, as the gap is up to 2:17 now.
And once again, you can look down at the back end of the field, all this single file line. Those are the guys coming back up that got stuck in the bottleneck of that crash. There are going to be guys coming up for a while, though. Fortunately for them, the chase is not really on at this point, so they should all make it back up without too much trouble, Steve. But it is wasted energy, and you also have to live with those bumps and bruises over the next almost 3 weeks. And, you know, you're already taxing your body a lot. Now you ask it, hey, I got to heal these cuts as well.
That's one of the things that's really remarkable about these Grand Tours. When things happen so early, mentally, you have to get yourself in the headspace that, all right, I've got 3 weeks. I've got to suck it up, because this could really be demoralizing if I don't have the right frame of mind. I think back to Tony Martin and his crash at the beginning of the Tour de France this year. I mean, that guy was as battered and bruised as you could possibly be. You were thinking he was going to pull out of the race. He had a concussion, but yet he persevered throughout the whole race and somehow had the mental capacity to dig deep and stay in it.
Yeah, it's kind of insane, and that's one of the big attributes of a professional cyclist, is this sort of uncanny ability to always persevere, never give up, never say no. And actually racing the Peace Race, a couple-week long race way back in the 80s, Sergio A. now making his way back up here to the back of the field. But I had a teammate who crashed 3 times in one stage race, and I've had teammates who've crashed on the first day and the last day in the same spot. I mean, it just happens a lot.
Sergio A. now back at the team car here. That is him. A. now number 191. Now look for a moment like he might get some kind of service, but now he's going to ride up with his teammates. Now coming in as the team leader for this Sky squad. Coming off its second consecutive Tour de France win. Always a lot of pressure with one of the top teams in the sport, and a now really on the back foot.
Yeah, tough day for him. It's Edvald Boassenhagen there with his teammate Xabi Zondio, and then he now should just get pulled up by his teammates.
So we're down under 60 kilometers left to go, and the gap going back up to the breakaway. Almost 2.5 minutes ahead on the road.
Definitely ramping up the peloton speed a lot right now as they're coming through this small town. Of course, you always have the added chaos of the crowds and all the cars on the side of the road, as well as the occasional road furniture just to make it especially unfun in the peloton.
Now, fortunately for the riders, less road furniture in Spain than in most countries. A lot of wide avenues such as this one. So nothing terribly difficult to deal with on the course itself.
Yeah, speed bump is nothing like a traffic island, that's for sure.
Under 50 kilometers left to go, and under 2 minutes now from this peloton to the breakaway. Now mostly flat. That red vertical line shows you where the riders are at this point, and it'll remain flat until we get to the finish, when this race will be decided in an uphill through the final 4 kilometers. And big crowds in all the towns. Still holiday season in Spain. So even on a Monday, some good crowds turning out for the Vuelta.
Steve, really nice view here of how that front group is rotating as they were moving up on the right side and back on the left side. And so each guy just spends a very small amount of time in the wind. And speaking of traffic furniture,
now you think of the nerves and general anxiety that accompanies the riders in the first few days of any Grand Tour. If you can alleviate any of that through better roads, less obstacles, fewer traffic furniture components to deal with, it all makes a difference in the mental approach as riders become engaged in a 3-week race.
well, and Steve, part of that is just the personality of the rider. So some guys are just pretty relaxed and they're pretty chill, and so they don't have all this anxiety and nervous energy that they're wasting. And then other guys seem to really get wound up, and it's hard for them to sleep. I mean, I've had teammates who couldn't sleep, and they would have to black out their rooms and have, you know, noisemaker, you know, these little white noisemakers and stuff, because they would just get so wound up, especially if they're in the lead.
You get upset when you have a teammate who can't sleep and that keeps you up?
Well,
because who gets to decide if you get to turn on the TV, watch a movie? Who makes that call?
No, you can't do that. That's not okay. And okay, so that does bring up a good point, though. Why would all these riders not have their own rooms? You know, then you would think you would get better sleep, right? One guy's idiosyncrasies don't keep the other guy awake. It almost never works that way. Yeah, if you're Alberto Contador or Lance Armstrong or Greg LeMond or Bernard Hinault, you might have your own room. But the other guys all have a roommate. So you find somebody you're compatible with. The management of the team knows that. And if you got a tough teammate, they rotate him around.
So they should just be right in front of the peloton at this point. And how about this? Movistar has it lined up at the front with Astana trailing behind.
Quite a bit like they were yesterday on the final climb. This is Lastras on the front. What a great domestique he is. And I have to say, a guy like Pablo Lastras, he earns every bit of his salary. He rarely gets the glory, but he is in the wind a lot for his team leaders.
And his leader is Alejandro Valverde, who is right now fourth wheel in a white jersey. Valverde, former winner of the Vuelta a Espana. Like Rodriguez of Katusha, who we were talking about earlier, went deep at the Tour de France. Valverde also had to ride pretty hard at the Tour, so not exactly sure how strong his form will be throughout these next 3 weeks at his home Grand Tour as well. Under 10 seconds for these 5 riders. The day's signature breakaway about to be brought back.
Yeah, they're about to sign off on being off the front, no doubt, as the peloton bearing down.
A perfect shot of the separation between the 2 groups along the coast. Movistar reeling them back in. And it's about to be all together here as they cross over this bridge to a small little island off the coast. Movistar at the front of the peloton, Espana just behind. The breakaway has been caught.
I expect Movistar at this point is going to continue to drive it pretty hard. They're right now very much concerned about the potential for crosswinds creating havoc before that final climb. So they want to keep Valverde safe. Also on the left, you've got the red and white of Katusha for Rodriguez in the overall classification. And now we've got Radio Shack on the front. Fabian Cancellara up there. He's got Popovic on his wheel. Remember, they've got both Horner and Zubeldia in the top 4 overall.
Yeah, Chris Horner right now sitting in 3rd place, just 10 seconds off the race lead. Horner coming off a nice bounce back race at the Tour of Utah after sitting out the Tour de France, healing from injury. Typically, the Tour de France is a race Horner would do. Was disappointed to miss out this year, so he's made the Vuelta a bigger part of his season focus.
Oh boy, I saw those barricades and I thought we were going to have a catastrophe. Almost a motorcycle hit it. And it looks like the guys...
Things bunching up there at the back.
And some guys off the road, but I don't think anybody crashed.
Now Belkin coming to the front. Saxo Bank is up there as well. Well, you don't often see racing like this. Still almost 40K out from the finish, do you?
No kidding. Well, this is just a lot of dicey roads, and there's some more barricades there. And you can see the riders on the front. These guys do not want to see each other hit the deck. I mean, yeah, they're fierce competitors, but they also care about their compatriots' health and well-being.
Trying to slow it down as they move over now to that island that we talked about. And this is more just about safety now. Movistar making that gesture to slow it down. They're not going to go to the front. Nobody's going to drill it. This is just about keeping things safe and sound for the time being. And these were those barriers. Oh, a Caja Rural rider had gone down.
And the course coming back on itself. Anytime as a racer you have any sort of barricade in the road, whether it's a cone or a lane separator like that or anything that's low, it's so dangerous for the riders because when you're in the peloton you can't see it. And look at this, the field is all split up.
Now the gorgeous landscape belying the danger of the course and the stage right now.
Oh, this has turned into a really sketchy stage for the guys. A lot of frayed nerves at this point.
And this other group that's off the back, over half a minute behind them now. And it looks like they're getting a tailwind across the water here, judging by the kite surfer. Here's Belkin in the green on one side of the barricades.
And at this point, if you're up at the front, you're just going to stay in that rotation. So you pass the guy in front of you, you move over, let the next guy come through. As soon as you get out of the rotation, then you get stuck back there and you get swarmed. So you just stay in the rotation and use that energy.
Looking at the flag we just saw on that bridge, it looks like it's more of a crosswind now as they come over.
Yeah. I think it's actually cross tailwind at this point, and all sorts of groups out on the road. This is from the crashes and from the crosswind and all the corners, the road furniture.
And it's really blowing. Look at the trees.
You know, Steve, a lot of times people ask me, they say, how can the wind make so much of a difference in a bike race? And the answer is simple. If you're driving your car 32 miles an hour and you go stand on the hood, how much wind do you feel?
Which I often do, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these guys are almost getting as much wind as a body standing up. And so if you got a crosswind, it's going to push you around quite a bit, and it's going to really impact the fact when you can't get a draft, it's going to cause splits in the field.
And Espana is at the very front. That's the team, of course, of race leader Vincenzo Nibali, who's in a red jersey.
And quite often what happens, Steve, is after there's a crash and a mishap like that, the field will sort of put down their guns for a little while. But if you don't get back up there, eventually the racing comes back on, and it looks like that's what's starting to happen. So that group may be in trouble now chasing.
In a single file here behind the group at the front. And when you have to battle like this through the wind to catch back up, that's less energy you have at the finish. Now there's a couple of Euskaltel riders here in this group. Now, with Sammy Sanchez losing so much time yesterday, it looks like Mikel Nieve is probably going to be their team leader at this point for the team in the orange and black. But they have a couple of guys in the second group who are chasing. I also saw a couple of Euskaltel riders in this front group as well. Hard to tell exactly who is where at this point, with 27 kilometers still to go. And wind all along the road here the rest of the way. It's been one of the defining features that has framed this third day of racing along the coast.
There's no doubt that the racing is being hard again. It's ramped back up. The truce is off. Things are back on. Still in the crosswinds, and still with all that road furniture out there. Yeah, look at that. The chasing group is losing time now. It looks like they are going to not make it back up to the peloton. They didn't get up there before the race picked up again.
Now Movistar now, the team in the dark blue with the green helmets at the front.
Crosswind and a really narrow piece of road because they're restricted to one lane. This makes for some very tough bike racing.
Now going back across the bridge. A great day for kite surfing and parasailing, but for bike racing, it is difficult. And it's so amazing how little it takes for different groups to form when you have wind. You would think, okay, if you get shot out the back and you're just half a minute or so behind, you can recover that. But when you have wind, when you have riders at the front going hard, you're more likely to go backwards than you are forwards and regain contact.
Yeah, and typically in these situations, the strongest riders are in the front group. So you may have a few, and these guys just got spit out the front group, so they're being caught. You may have a few really good guys in the back group, but most of the heavy hitters are in the front group. And that front group is starting to split up right now, Steve. You can see the crosswinds here creating separation and a bunch of guys going off the back.
Look at how this is stretched out over the water.
Well, this was exactly what everybody was worried about. You don't get much more exposure than being on a bridge on the ocean.
Well, we've seen the wind, we've seen the crashes. It has all conspired to put the riders in this dilemma. This is the group that is chasing.
Well, all these guys trying to work into the rotation, but they would actually be better off if they had more roadway, because then more guys could pull through. Now, if you look at this group in the front, you can see right here at the back a little bit of a split opening up. And so some guys saying, okay, I'm going to move over to the left and create another echelon and try and give guys a chance to draft off of me. And then maybe we'll get back on. If you just stay in the gutter and everybody's in the wind, you shoot yourself in the foot. You got to give other guys a chance to draft.
Look at this. More riders even back here.
Oh, it's just a big mess. I think that's that chasing group, but they're catching riders that are being spit out from the front group.
So we really have 3 to 4, maybe 5 different little groups out there on the road right now.
Johnny Hogerland is in this, the Dutch national champion. See him poking on the left side of your screen with a red, white jersey as the Dutch national champion for Vacances Soleil.
Now, we always note how important it is to be at the front when you're approaching a final climb. But you want to be at the front almost any time you can, because on a day like this, we can see happen what has happened. Crashes, wind, different groups forming. Because of that, if you're a GC contender long term, you've got to stay at the front for a variety of reasons throughout the stage.
Indeed, I tell you, Steve, a day like this is a nightmare for the bike racers. There's so many things that can go wrong, and so many things have gone wrong for a bunch of guys. With these wins, it totally changes the complexion of the bike race.
Chris Horner, also the oldest rider to ever lead a Grand Tour as well. He sits on top of the standings over the Giro champion Vincenzo Nibali, as well as former Vuelta winner Alejandro Valverde, after 3 days of the season's 3rd Grand Tour.
A lot of times they'll say, well, we're taking it day by day. That's because they are taking it day by day.
That last podium was for the stage win. This one is the one he really wanted. The red jersey and the overall lead.
Chris, he looks very good in red, doesn't he?
Won a stage at the Tour of Utah, finished 2nd overall recently. Earlier this season was 6th at Tirreno Adriatico before he took some time off because of his knee injury. Spent 5 months back in the States on the West Coast, rehabbing, training, and now he's back in Europe in style.
He's got a great team to support him throughout the rest of this week, and we'll see how he fares.